Well, Q2 of 2022 is finally done, and people are talking about all of the fallout, including who the leaders are in EV sales, etc. But I think they're missing the big point, which is the level of EV adoption globally. Let's take a look. And for those of you interested in investing, check out WeBull, an amazing platform for buying and selling stocks, and now cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Dogecoin, and others. Open an account and get a free stock valued at up to $200, and fund your account and get another free stock valued at up to $1,600. Check out the link in the description and help the channel at the same time. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. So we're still probably a couple of days away from Tesla releasing its Q2 delivery figures, but it seems like consensus is finally kind of forming around the 250 to 260,000 unit delivery mark. If you don't recall, Q1 had about 310,000 units produced and sold, more or less. That's not the exact number, but anyway, approximately that. But you'll notice there is a really big dip of about 50,000 or so units from Q1. The reason for that, of course, is the Shanghai lockdown, which have caused Tesla and many other auto manufacturers to not be able to produce cars at all in April and a big chunk of May. And, the ramp up has been relatively slow back through the second half of May and into June. So there's going to be a major fallout for that. Of course, unless there are more lockdowns in China, that won't have a long-term effect. But there is kind of a knock-on effect, right? You can see things like supplies, chips, raw materials, all of that kind of stuff has to get to Tesla in order for them to build the vehicles. So obviously there's still a continued problem with ramping up. And of course that even goes beyond China because of course raw materials and many of the components come out of China that are used to build vehicles in the rest of the world. So obviously there are knock-on effects. Anyway, that will continue on, but the Q2 effects of this should be relatively minimal. So at this point we're looking at, somewhere around 255,000 units produced in Q2, but then we should be back up over 300,000 units produced in Q3 and hopefully substantially more than that in Q4 as Giga Berlin and Giga Austin ramp up. Speaking of Austin, if you didn't catch my video yesterday, definitely check it out here. It's about batteries and how it looks like Giga Austin is now split their production line to use 4680 battery cells and 2170 battery cells, so they're able to produce more vehicles because of course the ramp up of new technology like 4680s takes time. Anyway, check it out if you're interested, but it's really, really good to know that Austin is ramping up and Berlin is also ramping up. There have been rumors about 5,000 cars per week at Austin. That seems kind of ridiculous, maybe 1,000 to 2,000 cars per week. And hopefully the goal is to get to 5,000 vehicles per week. Maybe by the end of this quarter, maybe by the end of the year, who knows? But anyway, that's kind of their ramp up. If they hit 5,000 cars per week, that puts them at about 250,000 cars per year. So, that seems like a pretty decent ramp up by the end of 2022. Next, we turn to Clean Technica, who produced some really nice graphs of January to May of 2022 for EV sales by brand and by vehicle and et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, the really interesting part of this is that Tesla's Model Y at almost 215,000 units sold from January to May is by far the leading electric vehicle. You can see the Model 3 is second, and next is the Wuling Hongguang Mini EV at about 161,500 units sold. And if you don't know, the Mini EV, I'll put a picture of it up. It's like a smart car size car. It's tiny, tiny, tiny thing. And I think it's around $4,000 or $5,000 US. Obviously, it's only sold in China. It couldn't even be sold in the US because it's not a safe enough vehicle to be sold in the US. So it's like 1/10 the cost of the Model Y, actually less than 1/10 of the cost now of the Model Y, and yet the Model Y has substantially outsold it. So this is incredible news for Tesla that their Model Y, as Elon predicted, was going to become the biggest selling car in the world relatively soon. I think he said by revenue in 2022 and then by volume in 2023. So we're working our way towards that very quickly because of course, even if the Wuling Mini EV sold the same number of units as the Model Y, by revenue, the Model Y would make about 12-ish times more money per unit. So obviously the Model Y is going to make much, much more money than the Wuling Mini EV. The other fascinating and rather scary part to this entire thing is that if you look at the rest of this list, you have to go all the way down to the Volkswagen ID.4 before you get to anything that's not made in China after the two Tesla models. And what does that mean? That means exactly what I and many other people on YouTube and the internet have been saying for a while is true. And that is that China is coming for electric vehicles. They are going to be the major player. It seems like right now things are breaking out so that we'll have Tesla and we'll have several Chinese players trying to break into that market to become number 2 or potentially number 1. You know, eventually they could actually outmatch Tesla. Some people, including Herbert Diess, actually have said that other vehicle manufacturers like GM and Ford and Volkswagen were actually going to overtake Tesla by 2025. That's pretty much patently ridiculous because they're not selling enough cars in China, which is the biggest market. So they're clearly not going to make any inroads in that. Yeah, they'll eventually become a player and they'll make a good amount of EVs, but they're never going to be in a place where they could overtake Tesla. I'm not sure any of these other companies can, with the exception maybe of BYD, for a good long period of time. So it looks really like what's going to shake out is that you're going to have Tesla and then you're going to have all of these Chinese players trying to match and become number 2 and 3 and 4, etc. by brand. And if you hear that GM is selling a ton of electric cars, yeah, they kind of are, because the Wuling Mini EV actually counts as one of GM's cars. It's like double counting because Wuling's also counting it because it's a joint venture anyway. So GM's counting it and Wuling's counting it. But no matter what, if you start looking at revenue as opposed to just, you know, massive amounts of sales, because again, this thing is tiny. I mean, you could buy a computer for more money than this vehicle. That's how cheap this thing is. So it's kind of not an apples to apples comparison to talk about the Wuling Mini. But anyway, if you sort of discard that, it's very, very clearly Tesla and the Model 3 and the Model Y, and then BYD, and then a bunch of other Chinese players. And then you get to Ford and GM and Stellantis and Volkswagen, etc. And then we get to the really important takeaway here, which is regardless of who's fighting who and who's coming out on top, it's the global EV adoption rate. This is really, really important. And this is from a research note from Morgan Stanley that Stephen Mark Ryan actually put online this morning. So thank you to him for finding this. Again, I'll put the links in the description if you're interested in looking further. So if you look at May 2022 versus May 2021 year-to-date sales, so that's January 2021 to May 2021, to January 2022 to May 2022, you can see EV sales have gone from 1.3 million sales in 2021 to 2.4 million sales in 2022, or a 77% year-over-year increase. And then if you just look at May 2022 versus May 2021 regionally, you can see that China's gone from about 10% to about 20%, or nearly double in 1 year. You can see that Europe has only grown by about 18%, 8.4% to 11.4%. But then really tellingly, the United States, which has been a big laggard in EV adoption, has gone from 2.3% to 5.3% EV sales from May 2021 to May 2022. So that's more than a doubling in the United States, right? It'd be 4.6% if you doubled it, and they're up to 5.3%. So still the US is lagging, but over 100% growth rate in year-over-year sales is incredibly telling. This is the United States. This is the land of cheap gas and big diesel trucks, etc. We just did a road trip to my parents again in Springfield, Virginia, and then back home again in the past week, as I'm sure you noticed because I was doing a lot of gym videos. But anyway, we got to see an awful lot of ICE cars out there and a lot of diesel cars making a lot of noise and everything. And I was like, man, how much quieter is the road going to be when we don't have these things on it? But anyway, the important part here is the US is a big laggard in terms of EV adoption, and Tesla owns about 70% market share in the United States. So of that doubling, over 100% growth, a lot of that is Tesla. So they're getting incredible growth in the United States. So all of this is really, really good news. I'm not exactly sure what's going on with Europe. Maybe their adoption rate was so quick that they kind of backed off a bit, but only an 18% increase is not that massive. But in both China, where it's actually at a fifth, 1 out of every car is being sold right now is an EV. So, I mean, right? If we double that twice more, I mean, goodness gracious, then we go to 40% and then 80%. So if we had 2 more years of 100% growth in China, we would be at that S curve. So in China, right, you've got the S adoption curve, slow, 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 and then it takes off and it becomes linear at, you know, some angle like 45 degrees or something, and then it backs off when you get to about 80%. But in 2 to 3 years in China, we could actually get to the backing off point. We could actually jump from having almost almost no EVs to having almost all EVs in the space of a half of a decade in China. And China, the government, is really pushing this because, of course, well, they've got two reasons for this. Number one is they've got massive pollution issues. So obviously it's good for them because you're getting rid of the local particulates and everything of everybody burning ICE vehicles in a concentrated area. So that's one thing. Of course, they're also going green with their energy grid, or at least greener. So they are kind of lagging behind in that area. But then the other thing is that China also knows that they have a chance of just suddenly becoming a major, if not the major player in the world in terms of vehicles. They're suddenly in a spot where they were like, they had no chance. They were always lagging behind. They made vehicles that nobody outside China wanted to buy, etc. But all of a sudden they have a chance to just leapfrog everybody else and become the major player in the world. So I'm pretty convinced that the Chinese government, as hard as they can, is going to push everybody to become EV adopters as fast as possible. So I really think that 20% could easily grow to 40% next year. And then we'll have to see. Getting from 40 to 80% is just a lot of vehicles. So it may slow down just because they can't produce enough vehicles to meet that demand. But anyway, in Europe and the United States, you can see how the adoption rate is slower, and it is much slower in Europe than it has been. So I'm not exactly sure why that's going on, but I find it really good news that we're at 5% in the United States. And again, if we get a doubling to 10% next year, and then 20% the year after that, and 40%, it won't take that long before the US also gets to 80% adoption of EVs. And again, I think the big thing, especially with gas prices being as high as they are right now, which is going to drive more people to really consider EVs, is just the ability to produce enough vehicles to meet the demand that's going to continue skyrocketing. And also remember that as every doubling of production, we have Wright's Law in effect too. So every doubling of production of electric vehicles, the cost of them comes down. Even with all the goofiness of supplies and chip shortages, that's going to cause some bumpiness in the short term. But in the long term, these things are definitely going to become cheaper than ICE vehicles, than internal combustion vehicles in the next couple of years, sticker price wise. And once they do that, there's no turning back because it's cheaper to own an electric vehicle. We've put 30,000 miles on our Tesla Model Y, and I've changed the tires. I've rotated the tires a couple of times. It's almost time to buy new tires, so that will be a big expense. But I filled up the wiper fluid twice, and I think that's it. And there were a couple of small issues right after we bought the car that service came out and fixed at our house, so no big deal. But anyway, it's amazing, right? There's just no cost associated with the vehicle. And of course, it costs way less to charge the thing up than it does to go to a gas station and buy gas. So the cost of owning the vehicle is so much less, and the number of moving parts is so many fewer that it's a no-brainer to own an electric vehicle if you can afford it. So as we hit price parity between ICE and electric vehicles for sticker price, there's no question that EVs are just going to continue to rise. So anyway, this is all amazing news. I feel like not enough people are talking about this, but it's incredible to see that the US more than doubled the market share of EVs. Yes, it was only 2.3 to 5.3%, but that is still huge. It's a doubling. It's an exponential growth. Remember, you double that again, it's 10%. You double that again, it's 20%. So all of a sudden we could be at 1 out of every 5, just like in China, in only 2 years. So we might only be 2 years behind China in terms of EV adoption, and they're known to be outrageously aggressive about their EV adoption rate. So to recap, we're looking at about 250 to 260,000 deliveries from Tesla for Q2. That's the consensus. We'll find out in a couple of days. Globally, from January to May of 2022, Tesla Model Y is by far the best-selling electric vehicle on the market, which is really incredible. And the EV adoption rate is hitting an exponential curve, at least in the United States, and in China. We'll have to take a look at what Europe is doing as the year progresses and see if maybe that rebalances out. But anyway, this is really fantastic news for new energy vehicles, for Tesla, and of course for Chinese manufacturers. So it'll be interesting to keep an eye on all this and see what happens in another 6 months. All right, I hope you enjoyed this episode and found it fun and thought-provoking and interesting. If you did, please do like it so other people can find it. And of course, consider subscribing for more of this kind of content. As always, a huge shout out to my patrons on Patreon. Thank you all so much for your support. I really do appreciate it. And of course, if you want to join the team, just check out the link in the description. And if you're interested in a whole bunch of really cool merch, check out our merch store. Link is in the description. We have TeslaBot t-shirts, the Tesla meme t-shirt, Success is a Possible Outcome, 4680 battery cells. All of that stuff is on t-shirts, mugs, tumblers, and on. So check it out. And for those of you interested in investing, check out WeBull, an amazing platform for buying and selling stocks, and now cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Dogecoin, and others. Open an account and get a free stock valued at up to $200, and fund your account and get another free stock valued at up to $1,600. Check out the link in the description and help the channel at the same time. Thank you. And finally, don't forget we are both Tesla and Amazon affiliates. If you look in the description, you can see how going shopping for a solar roof, a power wall, or anything on Amazon helps out the channel. In the meantime, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.